Apologies for the late start. We can blame the traffic. Can we remain standing while the prayers are said, please?
Let us pray. Holy One, known by many names and beyond all names, Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Spirit of community, Spirit of justice, we ask your blessing on the people who have been called to lead the community in which we live, work and play. Help them as leaders to not ask first, how do we fix this? But what do we need to learn? How might we need to change? And to whom do we listen? Remind them, because we all forget from time to time, especially in the noisiness of political debate, that they are not only leaders, but also servants, and that it is their responsibility and ours to serve the common good of all. Remind us that no matter where we live, everyone is our neighbour. Throughout the ages, prophets have called leaders to respect and protect the least of those among us. Our children, the elderly, the poor, those who are hungry, those who have no homes, those who are ill in body, mind or spirit, the strangers and the immigrants in our midst, those who live on the margins, those who live alone, and those who are forgotten. Grant us all the wisdom and courage to know and do what is right and good and true. May they and we speak out when it is time to speak out, and listen patiently when it is time to listen. And may all of us be guided by the spirit of community, by the spirit of justice, and by the spirit of love. This we pray in the name of all we hold sacred and holy, all that we hold good, right, and true. May it be so. Amen.
I have not been notified of any announcements or special business. Do we have any apologies for today's council meeting?
Councillor McIntyre.
Any further apologies? Thank you. Okay. Any further apologies? Sorry?
Councillor Marshall.
Oh, Councillor Bushell. Sorry?
Councillor Heslin.
Councillor Heslin.
Declaration of interest. Do any members have any personal, prejudicial, disclosable, pecuniary interest that needs to be declared at this meeting? Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Garrido.
Councillor Garrido.
I'm not aware of an item on the agenda regarding 14 plus US. If any item should come up, I declared interest.
Any further declarations? No. Minutes of the meeting held on 18th of July and 29th of August.
Councillor Saunders, Councillor Turner.
Councillor Saunders. Sorry, didn't quite catch. Councillor, first one I called was Saunders.
In the minutes of the meeting of the July Council, number 9, under appointment of representatives to outside bodies, I am down as a appointment to the Inspiring Communities Together, replacing a vacancy. Subsequent to that meeting, I was informed, as was our leader, that in fact there was no vacancy and it was a mistake and I would not be appointed. Now, this is not quite on par with being refused a friend request on Facebook, but obviously it is something of an embarrassment. I did speak to the Inspiring Communities Together, and they explained to me that in fact this has been the position for the last 4 years since they've become a charity. They were only allowed by the Charity Commission 1 representative from the council in order so it shouldn't be a too incestuous relationship. They couldn't understand why the council actually thought there was 2. So I'd just like that to be noted. It would be great if some explanation or even an apology could be offered. Thank you.
And to ease any feeling, I'm quite happy to step down if ICT want me to do that and you take my place.
Can I move that in that case?
I think it's respect, Chair, it would be a matter for the council to decide who our delegate is. But I appreciate Councillor Hamilton's offer very much.
It is only acceptable for him. I found it like the way she was done. We'll end up with what you asked for, was acceptable.
Okay. What way are we doing that?
Thank you, Chair. I'm referring to the August extraordinary meeting of which I wasn't present. I did have a look at the webcast without getting too excited. But basically, I've read the minutes as well, and for the avoidance of doubt, there was a statement made by one of my colleagues at that meeting, which I feel was not actually correct. There was some misunderstanding. It was regarding the officer support to my group in respect of the ward boundaries. Without any doubt, we were offered all the help that we required. We didn't require all the help, but we were certainly, it was available to us, and I just thought I'd rather put that straight. Thank you very much.
Yes, Chair, as Deputy Returning Officer, bring to the Council the results of the 27th of September 2018 Eccles by-election. The report informs the City Mayor and members of the City Council of the results of the by-election. There is a list of all of the candidates and the votes cast, and after counting of votes, Mike McCusker from the Labour Party was elected as councillor and will hold office until May 2020.
Welcome, Councillor.
On?
Yeah.
That's on, is it? Right, I'm going to thrill you now again, Les. Yeah, Treasury Management Report, as you know, Mr Mayor, report fairly regularly on the Treasury Management Report. Nothing a great deal has changed since I last made this report, but just to bring it up to date. During 17-18, the minimum reporting requirements were fulfilled, so with no problems there. The regulatory environment places responsibility on the city mayor and members for the review of scrutiny and treasury management policy. So with no problems there. These are the salient points that I want to bring to your attention. The annual report for 27-18 covers the following areas: Council's treasury position, that the outturn, compliance with treasury limits, and investment and strategy outturn. And as I've said every time that I make comments on this, I feel that this is the most important part, how we invest our money and how we borrow our money for the good of the authority. Some important issues has happened. We've seen that interest rates went from 0.25% to 0.5%, 0.5%, yeah, earlier on in last year. So that was a marked change. In fact, that took us by surprise to some extent. At that time, all the reports were really showing that interest rates were going to rise a little bit later than they did, but nevertheless, there we are with that. Again, on the capital financing requirement, that reduced by 14.9 million this year. This was because of an increase in the CFR due to unsupported borrowing of 26.9 million. It was more than offset by 17.1 million of capital receipts set aside and 18.3 million for other debt repayments. So all in all, Mr. Mayor, the council took no long-term new borrowing. It did continue to renew temporary borrowing, which we've been doing for quite a number of years now. As you know, that this has been the strategy, but we're keeping our eye on that as the economy changes and what we will be doing in the future. So I'm obviously prepared for some questions, Mr. Mayor, if anybody's got any to ask.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, clearly, it's very much a factual statement, so I don't propose to go into any detail whatsoever, but just to make one or two comments. The first, in fact, is to offer thanks to our officers and our lead member for the way they've actually dealt with the accounts. Clearly, the amount of borrowing that we have, over £400 million, needs a lot of managing. And any change in interest rates, of course, is something that has to be managed extremely carefully. I'm pleased that we've been able to manage that this time. But the only thing I would actually say is that it really is a cautionary note for the future, that when we're thinking about borrowing, we ought to first of all think about the amount we're already committed to, and secondly, whether we really do need to borrow any more. It's a heavy commitment. 400 million, comes off the tip of the tongue, doesn't it? £500 million, we're nearly there. We do have to be careful, and that's just really a cautionary note to think very carefully if we are considering further borrowing in the future. Thank you.
Council has to consider outturn position from treasury management.
Agreed.
Yes, Chair, thank you. This is a report to detail the proposed arrangements for the governance arrangements for the Transport for Greater Manchester Committee. The Greater Manchester Combined Authority approved a report in June of this year which proposed that the TFGM committee would remain as a joint committee but reduce in size to 23 members from the current 33. This is a joint committee of the 10 districts of Greater Manchester, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and in due course the Mayor for Greater Manchester, And the proposal is that the 23 members are made up of 1 from each of the districts, with 2 from Manchester, based on the Manchester population, 1 from the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, 1 appointed by the Mayor for Greater Manchester, and then a further 10 members nominated by the district, nominated by the districts to reflect political balance across GM. Each of the districts are requested to appoint their transport and highways portfolio leads as the committee carries out delegated functions of the parties. And then there will be a further review of the operating agreement in terms of reference when the final Greater Manchester mayoral transport powers are agreed by the order. So today, each GM local authority is requested to agree the size at 23 members and appoint 1 member to the committee and nominate 1 member to be appointed by the GMCA to ensure political balance. The members for Salford would be for the council to agree to appoint Councillor Jones to the TFGM committee and nominate Councillor Barry Warner to be appointed by the GM Combined Authority to ensure political balance. I'm advised that the political balance has been decided on by the leaders of the relevant alternative political groups. And the current position is that the council's asked to make those appointments, agree to amend the operating agreement to reflect those changes, and note that there'll be further review of the terms of reference in 29/20 once the order's made.
Any questions, comments?
Councillor Garrido.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say at the outset that we will not be supporting this report. One of the main reasons why we won't be supporting it is the fact that our solicitor referred to political balance, but I don't really see how you can get a body made up of 17 Labour members and only 6 opposition members can be called having a political balance. It's not a political balance, it's a Politburo of the Labour Party. And I think on that basis alone, we should not support this resolution. I think the second point is that this body has performed an extremely good job throughout our 10 districts. Until recently, and I must say I'm not declaring interest in this because I don't propose to put my name forward for the new committee. But I would say, in fact, that both Labour members, Conservative and Liberal members have done an extremely good job throughout the 10 districts in supporting their communities, particularly regarding the bus services. We're all, from time to time, hit very hard by bus services. And I think by reducing the representation in some local authorities to only 1 member, makes it virtually impossible for that 1 person to do the same job efficiently for the communities within our council area. So I think it is a retrograde step. It is taking power away from the communities, and I do think it ultimately could well affect the way we deal with our bus services and the way we're able to put pressure on the Combined Authority or the Greater Manchester Mayor in the way that they actually run that. And I think the third point that I would make, in fact, is that I understand the Stockport Council have actually turned this down. Now, I have spoken to the solicitor. My initial thought was that this might act as a veto, that if one local authority turns it down, then it can't go ahead. I still think there's probably some doubt there, but perhaps the solicitor could make comment on the legal position there. But can I at this stage move that we refuse to approve this report? Secondly.
Yeah.
You're second.
Yes.
Yes, so far as the question of veto is concerned, On matters where there is a requirement to consider the combined authority position, all 10 of the districts must agree to a proposal in order for that proposal to be successful. If one of the districts doesn't agree, then that would be subject to further consideration. All of the 10 are considering this report either last month or this month, and I think it's important that this council vote on the proposal so that there's a clear understanding of the Salford position. There isn't an automatic veto just because one council votes against it. It means it wouldn't be carried straightforwardly, but there would be further discussion and consideration.
Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Chair. I'm sure if you're not on the Transport Committee, this might be very confusing, but you know, we're grown-up people, so I think we can be honest about what's gone on. The Transport Committee is currently made up of 33 members, and by law, you have to have political balance in every authority apart from Bury, because they're the smallest. So Bury is the only one where the majority party can send their 2 reps. All the other authorities have to have political balance. The second thing about transport that's important is that even though there are arguments between the political parties, we've always managed to keep a consensus on transport. And the reason it's important is just dead simple. When you go to government ministers and you argue a case, if you've got the 3 political parties all with a different point of view, then you're in real trouble. And what we've always managed to do is go to Labour and Conservative governments, argue for trams and various other things, and we've always spoken with one voice. And that's the key thing about transport. So 4 or 5 years ago, when there was talk about reducing the size of the committee, I was dead opposed. And behind the scenes, I fought to stop, because some people wanted to scrap the Transport Committee, some people wanted to reduce it to 10 members. These were the arguments, and these arguments have gone on for about 5 years. But in the end, in politics, you have to compromise. You have to do what you think is right. Even at 23 members, I accept this will still be the biggest committee in Greater Manchester, and so on. So this to the council meeting, I never do that normally, but I felt I had to, because I wanted to hear what was being said. And to be fair, I did agree with what the Conservatives and the Liberals said. They said they were not opposed in principle to this change. That's what they said. They were not opposed to it. What they were opposed to is Labour local authorities or a Labour GM mayor having a veto over if there are going to be 4 Conservatives on the committee and there's going to be 2 Liberals, I agree with them that when they nominate them, Labour should not have the power to veto those nominations unless there's some kind of legal, there's something, so anyway, I won't go into that. But so all I'm saying is what the Liberals and the Tories said in Stockport, I agree with 100%. But they said they are not against this in principle, so therefore Stockport are in favour of this change. It's just a question of sorting the legal wording out, and I'm sure Miranda and her colleagues will be able to do that. So my recommendation strongly is that we support this report as it's written, and that we, because it is a compromise that everybody's agreed, the 10 leaders have agreed it, the GM mayors agreed it, and I think we have to go with it. And I'm pretty sure that the legal officers across Greater Manchester will be able to sort out the wording to satisfy Stockport.
Councillor Ferguson.
It's a procedural point. The motion moved to vote against this motion. If that was to be carried, we're still not in a position in relation to the report, and it would seem more sensible to me to vote for, to propose the motion for its people to vote for it or against it, and after that vote, we're in a clear position. I hope I'm certainly making sense to the city solicitor, I think. Sorry? I think we have to vote on the amendment. But we will then vote, if that is defeated, we then go on to the, okay, right.
I'm ever so sorry, you'll hear me. I think we need to vote on the amendment that's been proposed and seconded.
The resolution, or the amendment, is to, sorry,
Well, Councillor Robin Garrido proposed an amendment against the motion that is on the agenda, and that was seconded by Councillor Collinson. So the amendment was to
Slightly, there was no proposal seconded to start with on this, therefore I moved that we refuse it. And secondly, so sorry, that's the main motion. Yeah, yes. So that is the motion, in effect, not the amendment. So we now speak to the motion. Right.
Is there any further comments? If not,
Councillor
Garrido.
Thank you. I have great difficulty with this. I know all the power is now with the mayors and with the city mayor and with the leaders. My concern is that this committee, why alter something which has worked so well in the past? And I think our representatives, and I know Councillor Jones and Councillor Warner have been on this committee for a long time, and they've always done the best for the city. And it's a bit difficult for me to say about Robin, but I think Robin's done his bit as well on that committee. But I do think that why change something which has worked so well in the past and that we've done so well out of? I can't believe that we want to reduce it. That power that we have as councillors in this council chamber is being deleted. It won't happen at all. The decision will be made by the city mayor with the leaders and our mayor, because 23 won't be able to stand up against the vetoes. And I'm very, very worried about what is happening with that committee. I think it's an important committee, and I think it should stay as it is with the members and not reduce the membership.
The combined authority has already made that decision. No, but they have made the decision. That is democracy. That's all they say.
Councillor Murray.
Councillor.
Some of us have rather longer memories, Mr Mayor, than Councillor Garrido, because some of us remember that the Conservative opposition in this chamber argued in favour of an elected mayor for Salford, arguing that concentrating the power in one particular person would make for more effective political decision making. I find it rather strange that Councillor Garrido is now saying, oh dear, this might lead to a dictatorship. Well, perhaps you should have thought of that earlier.
Any further comments? It's been moved, reject. All those in favour, show aye. Thank you. All those against, show.
for the motion.
Thank you. That has been passed. Notice of motion, Cooperative Party Charter on modern slavery. Councillor King.
But the motion before us today, which is clearly laid out, is an issue that highlights something that we thought was resolved perhaps 2 centuries ago or thereabouts, in the age of William Wilberforce and others. But the reality is that the spectre of slavery still stalks our world, our nation, and indeed our very city. We often think of slavery as an injustice from long ago, but the reality is there are more people in conditions of slavery today than ever before. Estimates of some 40 million people worldwide, and, Chair of the Council, something in the region of 13,000 here in the UK. And it's an issue that can affect almost anybody. Modern slavery comes in many guises. For example, forced labour, debt bondage, trafficking, and domestic servitude. And victims are often hidden in plain sight, on construction sites, in farms, in car washes, or even hotels. And there's a subcategory of cannabis cultivation. Indeed, there was a cannabis farm discovered in my own ward only recently. And as we've been reading in the press recently, the practice of slave children, our children, running county lines at the behest of drug overlords. And this, I think, raises the questions about our schools. These children should be in our schools, and the issue of safeguarding. But nonetheless, we have slave children running county lines across the nation. Somebody could be in slavery if, for example, they are forced to work, are owned and controlled by their employer, have been bought or sold, just imagine buying and sold people today, are physically constrained, or are subject to physical and mental abuse. All of these are forms of slavery. The global index on slavery suggests there's about 45 or 46 million worldwide. And here's the rub, the rewards are astounding. The ILO, the International Labour Organization, estimates that annual profits from trafficking of humans generates a profit of £150 billion, bigger than the economy of some nations. And in the UK, there are victims from some 108 different nations. And interesting, the nationals of the highest number of nations are Albanians in the UK, the United Kingdom, and Vietnamese. I'll just give you one example. Mike grew up in the UK and he had some learning difficulties. He struggled to find a job locally. He was approached by a number of men in a van. They said, "We can find you a job, Mike." They did find him a job. They transported him miles and miles away. And they did find him a job working in a factory, and they paid him a couple of pounds an hour or something like that. He didn't even know he was being trafficked. And he didn't know that he was a modern slave. And this is what's happening in our nation. So what's happening to prevent modern slavery then? We do, of course, have the Modern Slavery Act, which was put on the statute book by Theresa May, no less. Section 54 of that Modern Slavery Act imposes certain conditions on organisations. For example, they should develop a human trafficking statement each year. But the reality is that many aren't doing this. They are not following the conditions and the provisions of the Slavery Act. And a report by the Business and Human Rights Resource, an NGO, suggests that many of the FTSE 100 companies aren't even doing this, though some are. For example, Marks & Spencer, Sainsbury's and Unilever. But there is one organisation, however, who has taken the lead on developing practical solutions to modern slavery, and that is the Cooperative Group, based here in Greater Manchester. They have developed a programme called Bright Future with the partner of City Hearts, which is a charity, and it's a new approach, and it's the first time a major UK business has offered work placements for survivors of modern slavery. What Bright Future does through the Cooperative Group is they promise to provide places for 30 people with non-competitive interviews, and if they are successful, then they're given a permanent job. Of course, that must be made sustainable, and they have asked a number of other large organisations to now join the Bright Future programme. And I'm very pleased to say there are further 10 major organisations, household names like Dixon's Carphone, The Body Shop, other independent societies, and Marshalls have now joined this. And the aim is by 2020 that there will be 300 liberated slaves in positions by 2020. That is the type of approach I think that other major corporations should be doing. But what are we as a council doing, though? We are, of course, going to sign up to the Co-op Party's charter later on this morning, and I commend the Cooperative Party for spearheading that campaign across the country, where we've now 37 councils who have promoted this motion. And of course, it's not the first time that the cooperative group has done this kind of activity. Way back in the 1860s, during the raging Civil War in the United States, the cooperative group supported what President Lincoln was doing in order to free the slaves in the southern states. And President Lincoln then wrote a note to the people of Lancashire for their support, saying that it was a sublime heroism not surpassed in any age or in any country. Now, I don't suppose that the cooperative movement is going to get that from Donald Trump anytime soon. But as individual councillors, I'm making a call to action to us. Can we as individual councillors, as we're going around our local wards, doing our work for our local constituents, can we look out, for example, for car washes or for local businesses that you might feel are doing something unusual? Or also, I'm also asking for the citizens of Salford to please look out for instances of modern slavery. And can the council individually, or indeed collectively with the GMCA, sign up to the Bright Future programme? But we need as a council, whatever we're going to do, to send a clear and strong signal that all forms of discrimination, unfair treatment, and especially slavery will not be tolerated within the borders of our city. Chair, I move.
Tien had arrived a couple of years before from Vietnam. She was an absolute pleasure to teach, always hard-working, putting in 110% into everything she did. Her eagerness to learn was unparalleled. She worked hard to learn English. It turned out learning English was not the biggest barrier she faced. I met up with some former colleagues just a few months after I left. They told me a story which was truly shocking. They had discovered that this girl had been trafficked and she was not living with family. The people she lived with expected her to work for many hours in evenings and weekends for her keep. She had no means of escape and no idea where to go if she did escape. Some of my ex-colleagues arranged her rescue from the people holding her and got her into a place of refuge. They weren't the sort of people you would expect to be such heroes, but heroes they were. 18 years ago, modern slavery was little talked about. It is, however, a shame that should by now have been eradicated. Instead, the number of people being denied their human rights through trafficking and slavery is rapidly increasing. In researching this motion, I've been horrified by some of the stories of those trapped in modern slavery. There are thousands trapped in forced marriages in this country who are brought here to work for no pay, often limited in their ability to escape by their lack of knowledge of the systems and that are there to provide them with some protection. In May 2018, a parliamentary committee said that the traffickers were winning and described vulnerable women as being exploited on an industrial scale. They summarised that there was a failure to support victims, there was substandard data recording and intelligence gathering, and very low prosecution rates. My own union, Unite, has run a campaign highlighting the plight of domestic workers forced into coming to this country and the promise of well-paid work. They are working alongside other charities to act on this issue. One of those charities, Kalyan, tells the story of a domestic worker, Regina. She worked for a wealthy family for a month before they brought her to the UK. She was provided with a contract to present to the British Embassy when applying for an overseas domestic visa, showing her excellent terms and conditions. When she got here, the family took her passport. They expected her to work from 6 in the morning till 11 at night. She was never paid and never allowed to contact her family. She slept on the laundry floor and ate leftovers. She eventually appealed to the reception staff of the apartment block for help, who contacted the police. the police demanded her passport back from her employer. What happened next was an added injustice. She was taken to her embassy and left there. No action was taken against those who treated her so badly, and no record was made of the crime that had taken place. She was effectively left stranded with no support, no money and no way to return to her country. Where victims of slavery may gain some protection from the Modern Slavery Act, the hostile environment created by the 2016 Immigration Act puts many trafficked workers who are working illegally in the unenviable position of being protected by one law and punished by another. Victims who are deported can find themselves back in the hands of those who first enslaved them because, as we know, those who become victims due to circumstance will continue to be at risk unless their circumstances change. This motion asks our council to take action through our procurement practices. Within many supply chains, there are people who bought their job on the promise of higher wages and better conditions, often taking out loans with high interest rates to secure those jobs. Shaking their chains to earth like dew, as the poem goes, is impossible if those chains are bought and paid for with a lie. If only getting rid of their chains was that simple. As individuals, we have limited power to act. For those on low wages, this is even more limited. I would love to buy ethically all the time, but as a single mum with 3 teenage daughters, clothing them ethically is near impossible. We do what we can, but capitalism often deprives us of the opportunity to take a stand. It's no good having perfect information if you can't afford to act on it. Big business and government have incredible buying power in their procurement choices, even if there are still gaps in that information. If the small shop I buy printed t-shirts from down the road can check his supply chains, there's nothing to stop the rest. I often wonder what happened to Tien after her rescue. She will be 34 now. I wonder whether she got the chance to fulfil her potential, as all people should be able to. If we have an opportunity to reduce the chance of more people falling into the trap of modern slavery, we must grasp it with both hands. I wholeheartedly support this motion and would ask you to do the same. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor King and Councillor Lewis, for all the information you've presented today. As you said earlier, there is an Act 2015, and we are being asked to adopt as a council the cooperative charter, which I believe is about 10 points. Anything that's going to improve the Act, we'd be for, so we will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Civilised society here in this country. I obviously welcome and support this motion. It raises awareness of this very serious issue, and it helps to strengthen the Council's commitment to eradicating modern slavery and offering support to victims. I know that already the two safeguarding boards have been delivering awareness training and are looking at strengthening referral pathways and reviewing that currently. They're also developing what's called a transparency statement, and we're at present, there's only Tameside that has produced this statement, and we are developing that currently and are at the point where we're hoping to publish that statement. And I commend the Council for doing that. But I hope that by supporting this motion, that spurs the Council on to obviously take the next step forward and to sign this very important cooperative party charter. Thank you.
Councillor Saunders.
And can I say that as Conservative, obviously, I'm proud of the Modern Slavery Act 2015 that the Conservative Party piloted through through Parliament. Can I also thank Councillor King, who, by the way, I wish, as I would say, Mazel Tov on your winning a prestigious international award, I believe, recently. Can I just say that we know that this motion was provided sort of off the plate by the cooperative party, as it were, but could I ask that in future, when such a motion appears before the council, when the agenda is prepared, the name Salford Council appears on the agenda rather than leaving insert your council name on the agenda. Thank you.
Just very briefly, I suppose everything has been said so far, and I think it's very hard for probably most of us, in fact, to actually understand the depth of this problem if we've not come across it ourselves. We can only listen and see what's on the television, what's in the newspapers, and the accounts which we've listened to today, from particularly from Councillor Lewis, which I thought was extremely illuminating. And the only thing I would say is Councillor Saunders has already congratulated the government on making the first step towards this with the 2015 Act. And I'm noting, in fact, that there was a review carried out after the first 12 months of the Act by, I think it was Caroline Hawhey, who is a barrister, and she carried out a review, and one of the things she said in that review, in fact, was that our country, in fact, was the first to really take a lead on this, and that we're now being used as a benchmark as to how we proceed. So I congratulate the government on the Act. I welcome the charter from the cooperative movement, and I'm sure, in fact, that those items in the charter will be considered by the government when the reviews happen. I understand that it will be kept constant under review and updated. So this information that we've discussed today, I think, is quite useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Robin touched upon it there. Unless you're involved or know somebody that's involved, it's almost something that you don't think about. And we live in a world, and we turn the television on or read the newspapers, and there's so many horrendous things happening in the world today. You'd think that mankind would have learned lessons, but I'm afraid they haven't. And some of the Councillor King and Councillor Lewis there who've touched upon the reality of what is happening really should bring it home to us. And the fact that these cases are just totally unacceptable. And yes, we can pass this resolution and support this motion today. But it's more than that, isn't it? It must be more than that. The elected mayor must, and it's not just you, Paul, it's all of us, but must lead, and whatever we can do on this horrendous stories that we've heard today. I just feel at times ashamed that I live in a world that can be part of this. And you know, it is all about power and money and greed and exploiting the most vulnerable of people in the world. People in the main, and I don't know, and I'm dealt in it as Jim has or Kate has or others have. But these people that are being abused like this are probably coming from areas that they're already suffering from, really suffering. This can't go on. And we can make all the speeches we can today in here and maybe feel better for it. But unless something really changes, and we all, it's incumbent upon us all to not forget what's happening here and really try to do something about, to relieve us of this terrible situation that's been experienced by very vulnerable people. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
City Mayor, Councillor Haldane.
Have you got Councillor Edwards?
Thank you, Chair.
That's one.
I think what struck me about this motion is we're not talking about developing economies. We're actually talking about the developed world where modern slavery is manifesting itself. Some of the statistics in the motion are absolutely shocking. Yes, there are cases we can cite, but it's quite clear to me that this is a systemic problem. Look at the motion. 3,805 victims of modern slavery in the United Kingdom in 2016. That's a rising number, but it's still well below what the Home Office estimate is 10,000 to 13,000 people in this country. That is absolutely shameful. And one of the wealthiest economies in the world, one of the most progressive or purported progressive economies in the world, this is happening on our doorstep. I'd just like to thank the work of the Cooperative Party, and also we've heard from Councillor King in terms of what the Cooperative Group are doing with their Bright Futures initiative. Because it's the Cooperative Party and Councillor King, who we all know is a member of that party and very active within that movement, that brought this to our attention. And I just thank you for the hard work you're doing up and down the country to encourage local authorities to think about modern slavery, certainly in 21st century Britain, but also across the entire globe. And I think, Councillor King and Councillor Lewis have spoken so evidentially about the real issues we face within society in this country and around the world. And from my perspective, speaking on behalf of the executive of this local authority, I pledge to do all in my powers, through our decision making, through our strategies, through our policies, to tackle the scourge of modern slavery in 21st century Britain. But I'd also go one step further. This council chamber and the members of this council are acutely aware that we live in a perilous society. Society has become so fragile these days. And I think what's quite clear to me is the government have a significant responsibility in tackling modern slavery in 21st century Britain. So in addition to doing all we can within this city council, I pledge myself to also lobby this government to take this issue exceptionally seriously in the interests of the people of this country. I support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
In plain sight is often used to describe modern slavery. I read a story of a woman trafficked into this country shortly after being forced into marriage at 16. This woman spent 20 years of her life in the UK working illegal hours, with every single penny of her wages being sent back to her husband. For some of this time, she was forced to work as a cleaner in a UK college for almost 16 hours a day, every day. A cleaner in a UK college. Now that to me doesn't sound like hidden in plain sight, but unfortunately as a country I think we've been blind to this abuse that is quite frankly on our doorstep. It's only right that as a council we ensure that nobody is exploited within our contracts. This woman eventually fled her abusers. She told BBC News about the first time she received money. The first thing she bought was sanitary towels. She said it felt like Christmas. Imagine 20 years being enslaved, 20 years working days as long as 16 hours with no rest, no pay, dirty clothes and enforced poverty as your abusers reap in the benefits of the forced labour that you sow. 20 years with every single part of your life in the hands of traffickers who have no qualms about using physical and sexual violence against you. And in this woman's case, they threatened to kill her children to keep her trapped in a life of sheer misery. Imagine living this life for 20 years. having the bravery to speak out and escape, and then being given 45 days to recover. At the end of those 45 days, you could have no shelter and lose protection from those who abused you. I urge members to not only support the motion, but to familiarise ourselves with the telltale signs of a victim, so that when this abuse is in plain sight in front of our eyes, we're able to intervene. Thank you.
Councillor Saunders.
Sorry, just a bit legal here. Just ask for clarification that we're going to take the motion as if it actually said Salford Council rather than insert your council name. Thank you.
All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against? Thank you. That was unanimous.
Still exists. What? Still exists? Yeah. Council King, and it's very much affiliated with the Labour Party. And some Labour.
So why do you keep mentioning what's your point?
Because they...
Chair, members of the council, I think just before I begin, I have already asked for a slight dispensation because my speech is slightly longer than usual, because I'm sure you can appreciate an awful lot has happened between the last council and this one, given the conference season and the speeches from the Prime Minister. Nevertheless, what I'd like to do is first start off by congratulating and welcoming to the council chamber Councillor Mike McCusker. Absolutely fantastic result in the ward of Eccles, and well done to everyone who was involved in that campaign. Also, I'm really looking forward to working with Mike because of his experience in the community and voluntary sector and social enterprises, something which I know many members are acutely aware of our expertise in, being a social enterprise city. So really look forward to working with you in the forthcoming years, Mike. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm pleased to greet you all today to say that my usual tirades against Tory austerity may actually be coming to an end. with the Prime Minister letting us all know in this year's Tory party conference in Birmingham that our hard work is actually paying off, and more importantly, austerity is over, to cheers from conference delegates. However, this overdue but much welcome news seems to be in direct contradiction to the Local Government Association's predictions only a couple of days before the Prime Minister addressed the nation, suggesting that her own Chancellor, Philip Hammond, is set to announce a further £1.3 billion worth of cuts to local councils' revenue support grants in 2019-20. What this actually means is that councils up and down this country will have lost 60p in every pound the government has provided for services by 2020. This news also comes despite the director of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Paul Johnson, highlighting that the Chancellor faces a £20 billion black hole in the UK's budget deficit by 2020-21, following the Office for Budget Responsibility's downgrades of productivity forecasts. Well, let's not forget, we have been disappointed by Tory promises before in this council chamber. Let's remember the new money invested into adult social care last year, paid for by raiding the New Homes bonus, which saw the City of Salford lose £2.3 million, the second worst hit council in the entire country. Also, do you remember the announcement of £2 billion for councils to build homes at the previous Tory party conference in 2017? This announcement seems to still be tied up in red tape around grant appraisals, cost-benefit ratios, supposed geographical areas of need, and the continual morass around truly affordable housing. And we're all used to Tory language games when it comes to dressing up figures. Word games such as the repeated claim that our hospitals have more money than ever, when our trusts are in crisis, the numbers of beds has reduced drastically, and the annual increase in expenditure has fallen to its lowest rate since 1948 under David Cameron. Well, what about the extra money supposedly being enjoyed by our schools? Despite the Institute of Fiscal Studies informing us in January that per pupil spending has actually dropped by 8%. More rhetorical wordplay from the Tory party. More announcements declaring more funding than ever before to mask the real decline in finances. And more desperate obfuscation from the Prime Minister to cover over the perilous situation facing British society. But let's for a moment just hope that this statement about austerity is not untrue. And for the record, I welcome the great many promises made by the Prime Minister during her Tory party conference. I welcome the announcements of the removal of the borrowing cap on the housing revenue account, allowing councils to borrow to build council housing once again. And it seems the Tories have found their own magic money tree. 240 million cash injection for the NHS, the 1 billion, if you remember, they found for the DUP last year, the £31 million sweetheart deal for Surrey County Council early last year, £70 million for Cambridge City Council to build council housing. But the Tory magic money tree, unfortunately, doesn't extend so far as helping the city of Salford, where in the last month we have been witness to the shame of the Conservative government, refusing us access to the 400 million available nationally, which incidentally took them a year or so to actually announce, for the removal and the replacement of cladding on our 9 tower blocks in Pendleton, whilst also, on top of that, refusing to allow this council to borrow and loan money ourselves, with the government preferring to procrastinate while maintaining a bureaucratic mirage around public spending on our and their PFI project. I'd like to put on record my thanks to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor John Merry, and Ben Dolan, and officers of this City Council, for continuing to negotiate with government financing for the removal and replacement of cladding, despite these perennial challenges from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government and Her Majesty's Treasury. This City Council has always been motivated by the primacy of resident safety, and your efforts have been a real credit to this city. And we will be replacing the remaining cladding for those blocks at the earliest possible opportunity. And I do have some good news. Our officers have managed to work within the PFI contract with the investors to that contract to secure the necessary funding from the private investors to actually forge ahead with replacing and removing that cladding. So on behalf of myself, I'd like to thank you all for working tirelessly to get a solution to what seemed to be at times a fairly intractable issue. Nevertheless, Chair and members of the Council, may I honestly say that since being elected in May 2016, an end to austerity could not come soon enough for myself and this City Council. Already this self-defeating policy has wrought catastrophic and untold damage on the British economy and British society. In 2012, Jonathan Porters, the former chief economist at the Cabinet Office, said that Tory austerity would cause the British economy lasting damage. In 2013, the then head of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, called for an end to austerity due to its damage on Britain's growth. Joseph Stiglitz, the former chief economist at the World Bank, has proclaimed that austerity has both damaged our economy and also threatened our future growth. The chair of the Office of Budget Responsibility, Robert Chote, has said that growth is weaker than it should be due to spending cuts, particularly the absence of spending on infrastructure. We are set to be the slowest growing economy in Europe, bar Italy, over the next 2 years, according to the International Monetary Fund. The great irony of austerity is actually the way it increases costs, often for the state and society. The Law Society have reported that cuts to legal aid have led to increased spending as court disputes take longer to resolve. In October last year, the Association of Directors of Children's Services stated that austerity policies were behind a record number of children currently in care, costing British taxpayers millions of pounds every year. In August last year, the Department for Work and Pensions announced that almost 40 million had been spent in court costs, defending themselves against claims on disability benefits that had been removed. In Salford and Greater Manchester, we know firsthand that the lack of council and social housing leads to millions spent on housing vulnerable families in unsuitable bed and breakfasts and temporary accommodation every year, and millions more tackling homelessness and rough sleeping across this nation. look at the chaos that has been caused in our public services. A chaos that will now take billions of pounds of investment to resolve and repair. The deficits in our healthcare and social care systems, A&E failing, bed numbers at record lows, trusts facing insolvency. Our prisons have descended into a state of anarchy. Our police forces have been stripped to the bone. Crime is on the increase, up 31% in Greater Manchester last year. From 8,000 officers in the city region in 2008 to 6,000 today, with Greater Manchester Police claiming that 10,000 are necessary to keep this city region safe. Life expectancy is falling. By 2041, at current projections, it will have decreased by an entire year on average since the previous estimates in 2015. Millions of people are now using food banks. Children are reported turning up hungry at school, with figures from the Trussell Trust also showing that British children's diets are the worst in Europe. And the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child have seriously raised concerns about the UK government's failure to prioritise children's needs. UNICEF report that the UK has some of the highest levels of hunger and deprivation of the world's richest nations. We even have head teachers protesting on our streets over the dire situation facing our schools. In-work poverty is skyrocketing, with 60% of impoverished Britons now actually in work. And more numbers of workers are being forced into insecure and poorly paid roles in the gig economy. We regularly hear from the government about the historically low unemployment rate. Yet the people of this country know the reality. Low pay, insecure terms and conditions of employment, 0 hours contracts are all rife within 21st century Britain's labour market. Chair and members of the Council, when the Prime Minister told the nation at this year's Tory party conference that our hard work had paid off and that austerity is over, to cheers from conference delegates, I ask you all, at what cost? And is this really what we call hard work in 21st century Britain? There is already discussions abounding about an even bigger potential recession, probably even bigger than the last one, following the total and abject international failure to regulate the banking system after 2008. And let's not forget the words of John Maynard Keynes. The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. The Tory vision for a buccaneering, bargain basement Brexit for Britain doesn't inspire much confidence in a Tory negotiated deal with the European Union. Our only hope now is a substantial state investment in our economy, prudent investments in infrastructure and essential services, re-empowerment of local government to plan and manage the growth in local economies. And as you will be only too aware, we still, in this City Council, have a further £16 million worth of cuts to make on top of the £198 million we've already lost from our budget since 2010. And that's why I, alongside 30 other local government leaders, launched the Councils Against Austerity campaign at this year's Labour Party conference. Because despite these public pronouncements from the Prime Minister and the Tory party, we will be fools to expect anything other than the usual dirty Tory tricks and language games. Early feedback from the Fair Funding Review for local government suggests that the government is planning to funnel more money back into the wealthy shires through negative revenue support grant calculations, allowing these authorities who have more than covered their loss of RSG through things like council tax and business rate collections to be paid back by the Exchequer. This is a further direct manipulation, in my opinion, of local government finances, with the analysis indicating that £152 million could be stuffed into 21 of the least deprived areas of this country, with Surrey County Council yet again scheduled to be the biggest gainer from negative RSG. Members of this council, you'll be aware I have written a public letter to the Secretary of State on this issue, and I've shared that with you all. Quite frankly, local government financing has become highly politicised by this current government. And it's a national scandal and a disgrace, with academics even at the University of Cambridge only yesterday highlighting that austerity has actively reshaped the relationship between central and local government in Britain, shrinking the capacity of the local state, increasing inequality between local governments, and exacerbating territorial injustice. It's because of this territorial injustice that we can expect to be informed of negative RSG's rollout at the Chancellor's autumn budget announcement later this year, and the forthcoming financial settlement for local government. But as usual, the Tories are throwing money at their wealthy heartlands and ignoring cities like Salford and the North more generally, where investment and help is desperately needed. And thankfully, decisions made by previous Labour councils in this city over many years have helped us to some extent weather this cruel and heartless storm of austerity. A history of investment in infrastructure in Salford has put us in a strong position for growth. In the last 2 years, bucking the trend of many areas of Greater Manchester, we have added £13.5 million to our council tax base and a further £2.7 million to our business rate base. And at the same time, our regeneration investments has seen a further £980 million of inward investment into the city of Salford and the creation of 1,200 new jobs. For every £1 invested, we have leveraged in £54 of private sector investment. National government should take note of Salford's example, rather than seeing it as an opportunity for further cuts in grant, further unfunded budget pressures, and further forced increases to council tax and associated precepts. Our investments in Greengate and New Bailey are also beginning to bring in commercial income to the City Council. Within the first year of opening, our lease at New Bailey raised £2.2 million for council coffers. Greengate will be opening soon, and we will further solidify our commercial revenue stream, helping us protect and support jobs and services in this City Council. We have also seen a huge investment in our green infrastructure in the city of Salford, as well as bike lanes running across the length and breadth of the city, and bringing RHS Bridgewater to the city of Salford. We've attracted £44 million worth of investment. The city is also working with the Lancashire Wildlife Trust to restore some of Salford's mosslands as carbon sinks, very important for tackling climate change across the city region. We've also invested in sustainable drainage across a number of sites to encourage developers to take this issue seriously. £9 million worth of investment has gone into the new flood basin at Castle Irwell, now protecting 2,000 homes in the city of Salford. Peel Park has been restored, receiving £2.5 million grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund and contributions from many partners. And also let's not forget about the new country park Cutacre in Little Hulton. 40 hectares have been developed to create a fantastic space for the people in that part of the city. And as part of the follow-up to Greater Manchester, their recent Green Summit, our local plan will set out an ambitious planning framework to deliver low and zero carbon new developments as we move to a zero carbon Greater Manchester by 2038. Government seems determined not to help this city and the north more generally. So in a sense, what we have to do is help ourselves. We've been responding seriously to many of the issues facing residents, including the traffic nightmare that engulfs many of our roads during rush hour. Despite the very real difficulties we are facing with the historic and chronic lack of much needed national investment in public transport, our investment in the Lee-guided busway has been a complete success, increasing patronage to 62,700 people per week. Salford residents now contribute to 47% of those journeys, with the rest of them picked up by Wiganers. There's a clear demand for effective public transport, and we urgently need to meet this demand by keeping up the pressure on government to invest in Salford, Greater Manchester and the north. Good progress is also being made on the updated version of our local plan for consultation, and the policies are in the process of being revised. Despite the ongoing delays following the Office for National Statistics publication of the sub-national population projections and the sub-national population housing projections, and the government's further intention to consult again on the objectively assessed housing need, or local housing need as it's commonly understood. Improvements are being made all over the city, and our local plan, I think, is going to take us to the next phase of delivering real strategic planning across the city of Salford. It is expected that the revised draft local plan will be taken to lead member for planning and sustainable development for approval in late 2018 and published for consultation shortly after this, around the same time that we go out for consultation on the revised GMSF, providing we can deal with some of these technical issues that seemingly sit at the heart of government at the moment. In Salford, you have a Labour council that is working hard in the face of significant adversity. With no cosy networks, backhanders or favours from government to rely on. Nationally, the picture amongst local governments is less rosy, with the county council's network predicting a third of their members will struggle to balance their budgets by 2019-20, rising to 2/3 the following year. And of the 11 local authorities currently in danger of bankruptcy, it's no surprise that 9 of these are Conservative administrations. That the entirety of local government is a victim of national government austerity. It is those councils that have embraced the Thatcherite dogma of outsourcing, commissioning, and an outdated zealousness for free market ideology that are amongst the first to fall. The councils that strip themselves of their assets and services to enrich external contractors at the public's expense. Despite representing areas with far lower levels of deprivation than many of the Labour peers, they are struggling to stay afloat because Tories fundamentally do not believe in equipping local government to adequately deliver services to the public. Austerity, if it is indeed over, has been an ideological folly, a hideous and obscene waste of human potential, life, mental health and well-being. This period in government will be the stain on the Conservative Party for many decades to come, a reminder of the cruel callousness with which this government has treated the elderly, the young, the infirm, the vulnerable, and those in need of support. From the disaster of universal credit to the disaster of the NHS reform to the travesty of the Windrush victims, the nepotism shown to friends, and years of waiting for money released for cladding post-Grenfell, the shame that over 100 households of Grenfell survivors are still in temporary accommodation. This Tory government has shamed their party, in my opinion, in the eyes of the British public and of the world, and it's now time to stand aside and call a general election. Thank you.
General questions or comments to elected City Mayor? Councillor Constance.
Councillor Jolly was first, then.
Oh, Councillor Jolly.
Then Collins and then Gordon.
Yes, when I heard the speech from the Prime Minister about austerity, I did think, is this some kind of joke? Because it's obviously not what we're seeing. But I'd like to come on to a little bit more about the negative RSG situation, because this is quite shocking. It was part of a report that came to the Overview and Scrutiny Board last month about the consultation on next year's settlement. And so negative RSG is part of that consultation, which, as the Mayor has said, is where in some authorities, the most prosperous authorities with the biggest tax base, the RSG has been reduced so much, it's now negative. And so there's a prospect of clawback. And in the consultation, there were three options given to deal with this. They were consulting on. One was to simply let it happen, which, of course, they won't do because it involves some quite well-off Tory authorities who are lobbying very, very hard for it not to happen. The second was to inject new money, specifically for those authorities, so the new money, but only new money for the most prosperous authorities in the country. Or the third was to get rid of the negative RSG, but to pay for it by keeping the total RSG for the nation within the same envelope, which meant reducing further the RSG for the other authorities to pay the most prosperous authorities. And the ones that would be hit hardest, as the Mayor has said, would be us and others like us. So, and already there was another report by the Local Government Association recently which pointed out that of all the cuts and austerities on local government in the last 8 years, they've fallen most heavily and hardest on urban authorities in the north of England, the Midlands and some London boroughs, almost exclusively, or most of them, Labour authorities, and those that have been hit least were Tory authorities. The most prosperous ones, the ones that now, under their proposals, are going to get more money, which has been robbed from us yet again. So yet again, what's happened throughout this process, taking money from the most poorest, the most vulnerable authorities, the most deprived authorities, and favouring the most prosperous authorities on a purely politically motivated agenda. Now, although the Prime Minister has said the end of austerity, the Chancellor has said nothing of the sort, and we have a budget later this month. But if it is the end of austerity, then in the budget later this month, the Chancellor, as an absolute minimum, just to hold things as they are and not have things get worse, will have to announce probably £3 or £4 billion extra money for local authorities alone without any other part of the economy. And that's a minimum just to hold things level. Will he do that? Well, I'll tell you this, I won't be holding my breath.
Councillor Collinson.
would bring it to the City Mayor because he'll obviously direct it to wherever it needs to go. As you know, it takes, a death must be registered within 5 days. A resident contacted me last month and it took her 5 days to get through. A recorded message says, lines are busy, please hold, and then eventually just cuts off. It's not a free phone number, it's a general number, which is the 793-2500 number. People will have issues with this, especially if trying to register a death when emotions are running high and they can't get through. Should there not be a separate phone number for register office instead of the general one? I tried this number myself after I spoke to my resident just to see what would happen. And a recorded message says it is quicker, easier and better to contact the council online. However, this isn't possible if you want to register a birth or a death because you have to actually make an appointment to go to the registry office with appropriate paperwork. So I was wondering if that could be considered a separate number and potentially a free phone number, especially if you're kept on hold for a long time. Thank you.
You should be speaking to Amanda Carruthers. It's a problem which she will deal with. Thank you. Councillor Robin Garrido.
Years. What's special about that? It's the 50th anniversary of having a Labour council in Salford. And to listen to this issue there, the Labour community fathers, they've got all these things and so on. In fact, what have they actually done in 50 years without their Conservative governments? Very little. And I think you should be ashamed of yourself, Mr. Mayor. You have your party that after 50 years, we have still done little to tackle poverty in the city. This council raised council tax and rates up to 80% collectively over a period of years. And yet with all that money being raised, we were still unable to produce the goods. And yet we turn around and have the audacity to blame the government for not producing the goods on your behalf. Well, I think, Mr. Mayor, you ought to look closer to home and you ought to look to what you have done as a party over the last 50 years. I think the one thing that you seem to be good at is looking backwards. And certainly if you listen to Mr Corbyn, and I try not to listen to him very often, but if you do listen to him, all we can talk about is going back 20, 30, 40 years, let's renationalise everything, let's take over the trains, let's take over all the houses, etc., etc. We all know, Mr Mayor, that did not work. We had dirty trains, we had trains that didn't run on time, we had buses that didn't run on time, right? You had queues at bus stops. We did not have a good transport system under Labour's nationalisation. And I do agree that we need to do things better, but we've had more investment in transport under the Conservatives than we've ever had under previous Labour governments. And again, we ought to remember that. You mentioned about the police, right? And we're certainly concerned about it. I'm concerned about it, my colleagues are concerned about it in our own area because we've had an increase in thefts and we're certainly about to have another meeting with the police. My concern is that the police have not made the best out of all the changes in technology that have come about over the last few years. Lots of things have been introduced to make the police more efficient, yet all we get from the police, I'm afraid, all the time is less resources, less officers and so on. It seems to me, in fact, that they have to start learning to live within their means. They have to start learning to use their resources in the best possible way. We ought to have more visibility of police. and yet it is so hierarchical, the traffic police, for argument's sake, won't come and park themselves on the local road, because all they want to do is sit on the motorway. There's a lot more that can be done by the police to help solve the problems. I think it's about time they stop moaning about resources and got on with the job and actually started to organise themselves more efficiently. Can I just briefly come to the cladding situation? We've spent the last 18 months or so since the dreadful fire at Grenfell talking about this as far as the PFI concerned, as far as Penton PFI concerned, whilst at the same time other local authorities and other housing providers have actually got on with the job and done things. No need to look any further afield than Salford, where half of the city now, controlled by City West or Forviva, has actually managed to replace all the cladding. They've actually managed to put sprinklers in every single high-rise block, right? And yet, what have we done on the east side? What have we done on the Pendleton? All we're doing is complaining that the government hasn't actually given a grant to a private company. But it's the private company that's going to be made to come up with the goods, and it shouldn't have taken us 18 months to get that far. We are lagging behind. It's about time we pulled our finger out. The other thing, in fact, is, while we're talking about the PFI, is the fact that we have allowed shoddy workmanship to take place on these properties. We've got windows that don't fit, we've got doors that have 2-inch gaps underneath them, we've got a whole host of problems, and we've even managed to leave, with all the money that's been spent, we've even managed to leave asbestos in place in some of the ceilings. So it's about time we did our job properly, and you shake your head, that's exactly what we've been told at Scrutiny Committee. I'm sorry, you can have your chance to say it, but we've been told that that's the situation. It's about time we pulled our finger out, and instead of complaining about other people, instead of trying to shift the blame onto the government, let's do the job properly ourselves. I could go on a lot longer, Mr. Mayor, but I think that's probably enough for the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Well, it's just flashing green. It's okay. Right, okay, right. Well, listening to Councillor Garrido, Mr. Mayor, he does really have a short memory, I'm afraid. And, I can see now why the Prime Minister has given up on trying to convince members of the Tory party to support her policies, and is now trying to convince Labour Party supporters to support her policies. Clearly, she thinks that her party is bereft of ideas, and I think, quite frankly, that she's almost given up on the idea that Boris Johnson is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. Oh, I'm glad you're pleased about that prospect. Right, let's deal with the facts, right? And I'm quite outraged, right? Shall we deal with the asbestos myth that Councillor Garrido has peddled? He was not told that. He was told that when these blocks were originally built, that asbestos was installed, as they were in every block, I suspect, in this country. Now, that asbestos is perfectly safe, provided it's not disturbed. But we are committed to installing sprinklers at our expense in those particular blocks. And of course that's going to disturb the asbestos. So it wasn't asbestos that was put in place during the work or anything of that nonsense. It was work that will have to be done in the future. And I have to laugh, Mr. Mayor, at Councillor Garrido saying, oh, the private sector is wonderful, but isn't it a disaster because the private sector has done the work on the blocks? I heard him say, we should have done the work ourselves. Actually, as socialists, we do believe that we should do the work ourselves. And I challenge you to come down to a platform on Piccadilly or Victoria where there's a Northern Rail train pulling in, and to question the commuters on there. Do they think the service has improved as a result of privatisation, or do they think it's deteriorated? Now, actually, this Tory party opposite had its finest hour at a special meeting that we held to authorise the loan that we were going to make to Peatol to ensure that the work was going to be done. And you may remember Councillor Turner and others getting up and saying, you're doing the right thing. you're doing the right thing to authorise this loan to a private company in order to make the work happen. Now we're told, I don't know if Councillor Garrido is playing the role of Boris Johnson here, Councillor Turner, I'd watch him if I was you. Right, now we're told by Councillor Garrido, oh, we made a mistake. We should never have supported you in actually making that loan. We think that you shouldn't have actually offered to make that loan. I'll tell you what the delay was, Mr. Mayor, and this is what, sorry, this is what...
I'm afraid I'm interested in landlines.
No, I'm going to stand.
On the voice first explanation, I did not say what we accused you of. Right? Firstly, in terms of the asbestos is there, and that's what I said. Okay? No doubts about that whatsoever. And I think we ought to get that right.
Right, well, I made it quite clear.
Yes, the other thing was about the loan. Yes, we all on this slide support the loan. We supported it in the immediate aftermath of the Grenfell fire, right? And we supported on the basis that we had to put in place emergency funding, right? That was a backstop to enable us to actually do the work, if need be, to safeguard our residents in Salford, right? We're 18 months down the line, and still nothing has been done, and yet that loan was put in place. From our point of view, we put it in place.
Mr. Mayor, that is not an explanation. That is merely reiterating the same mistaken points that he'd actually said. He said, and I heard him, Mr. Mayor, right, he said, as a result of shoddy workmanship, there are problems with asbestos. It is not as a result of the workmanship that took place. Right. Right.
It's on, you just need to be near it.
Oh, okay. It is not. Normally my voice carries quite effectively, actually, especially when I'm annoyed with Councillor Garrido. Right, he said that that was part of the problem with terms of the workmanship. I was making it clear that if it was a part of the problem with workmanship, we are talking about dating back to the 1960s, quite frankly. And I think it's a bit late now for Councillor Garrido to complain about that work. Secondly, yes, they did support the loan, and what happened? We spent month after month trying to persuade their government to actually authorise us to make that loan. They have had their legs cut from underneath them by their government. They ought to be ashamed of their government, and the fact is that they spent month after month, and I'm sorry, it's no good shaking your head, Councillor Garrido, they procrastinated over the whole of the summer. Oh, we're thinking about it, we're not sure you can do this, we'll have to consult the Treasury doesn't like it, until eventually, a couple of weeks ago, I got the letter saying you can't do it. And if you do try and even attempt to do it, we'll take away all the PFI credits and make it harder for you to do. So the fact remains, it was your government that forbid us from lending the money. So don't try and defend your government and try and defend your actions previously. You were either right at the special meeting or your government was right and you were wrong. You can't have it both ways, although knowing this particular party, they'll probably attempt to do it. I could tell you about all the mistakes that this government has made, all the attacks on Salford that the Mayor quite correctly outlined when he did his speech, actually. And you have the nerve to blame us, right? You have the nerve to blame us for all the problems we experience in this particular area. Perhaps you might like to tell us how many councils have actually gone bankrupt as a result of maladministration in the last few months. Right, Northamptonshire. Who controls Northamptonshire? The Tories do. Who controls Somerset? It's not, I can assure you, the Labour Party who controls Somerset. It is Tory councils who, through mismanagement, are finding themselves in a severe problem. And if this party ever got control, I'll just conclude on it, ever got control of Salford again, we'd be another Northampton, because they have no idea how to run the affairs of this council. They have no interest in defending the interests of the people of Salford, and their government has washed its hands of Salford, and you should be attacking your government, not this council which fights for the people of Salford.
Councillor Hines.
Well, none of us should be surprised from what Robin Garrido has said today. The reality is, he talks about the years that we've been running this authority. Well, Robin, are you actually saying the people of this city are thick? Because they've elected us year on year on year. And they've elected the Labour Council because they understand a Labour Council has got more interest in their problems than what any Conservative body would do. And I'll tell you this though, if for example, the Conservatives who stood in the last elections, many of them because they couldn't get anybody else, if they ever did win seats in our most deprived areas, it'd frighten them to death. They'd abdicate within a week. They wouldn't know how to cope. They wouldn't know what to do. They'd be frightened to death. And by the way, I won't name them, some of your members have actually told me that it would frighten them to death. The point is, we and the city mayor, and what he's in his 2 years, when he talks about trying to tackle anti-poverty, he says that because he and most of the rest of us on this side of the chamber understand what poverty's about, because we're close to it within our areas. We meet it day in, day out. I'm sorry, Robin, you're lucky you don't meet that same kind of poverty that our members in the inner city and other areas go in with day and day. If you want to see Councillor Reynolds' emails day in, day out about the poverty, and you talk about what have we done in the years that we've been. Well, number one, we've rebuilt the city, for example. We've rebuilt the city. We cleared the slums. Okay, other changes brought about. We didn't obsolete. I'm not trying to say that everything's perfect. It isn't. We know that. But we cleared the city. We, as the mayor has said, has invested. We borrowed money. And he used the figures for every pound was £54 returned. All the jobs it created. Would you have done it? No, you wouldn't. Because you've got to pay time and time again, and to go at me and others for the borrowing of this city council. We'd have been nowhere. We'd have been absolutely flat on our faces if you had been in control. You would not have supported the borrowing and the capital spend. And, of course, what you are doing and what your government is doing, as we've created those opportunities, unfortunately, because your government that you support will not fund education and skills to the extent that we need it funded so that they can take the opportunities that we've been part and parcel of putting into place. It's an absolute disgrace for you to say and call the mayor of what he has said today, because he is at least trying and pulling every position he can and talking to people about what we want to do on poverty. It's an absolute disgrace that you say that, Robin, an absolute disgrace. And I say again, if you had to take up the problems that the people in this city, in the inner city areas in particular, as Councillor Reynolds has done and others have done, you would be absolutely inundated and you wouldn't be sleeping at night. You would have nothing to do. I am angry on this one because I know what this city's about and how we put forward. And all that you can do whenever you criticise is criticise our spending, borrowing, or the council tax that we raise. That's all you can do. You've no alternatives while you've got a government that you support is in place. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. The Mayor...
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Right, I won't repeat what Bill said, although I'm in absolute total agreement with what he's just expressed to the council. And, you know, I feel that anger as well, Bill, because I think we've done a tremendous amount of things over the last 50 years as a Labour council. But I won't go on to that. What I just want to say as lead member for adults, the Mayor's referenced austerity and the removal of austerity. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth because we've been promised an extra 240 million of adult social care monies. But I do want to say that at Salford we'll probably only get 1.3 million of that money. And it really is only a sticking plaster over an horrendous wound. It will not solve the adult social care crisis. This spasmodic, a little bit here, a little bit there, is not a long-term funding solution for adult social care. We still face, just in Greater Manchester, a recurrent funding shortfall of 116 million by 2020-21, which, as you know, is not very many years away. And we're still waiting for this government paper on a long-term funding solution for adult social care. We've been waiting for this for well over a year. It should have come to us originally last year. It was promised this summer. The summer's been and gone, and we still haven't got it. So I just want to make those points.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go back quite 50 years, but I might go back 30 years just for Councillor Garrido. I'm just drawing your attention, Paul, to an article this morning about an IMF report that's just been released, which I'm sure you'd be very interested in, because it talks about Britain's public finances being amongst the weakest in the world, which I'm sure you're aware of. It particularly talks about the amount of money that has been wiped off the public sector wealth, which is £1 trillion in the last few years. And it actually puts Britain 30th amongst 31 nations, which just shows you just how bad it is. Now, at the top of that league is Norway, and it talks about the security that Norway got from its oil wealth. Well, of course, the oil wealth in Norway, they managed to maintain that within the public sector because they created a sovereign wealth fund. So that asset of the oil wealth went straight back into the public who owned it, should have owned it in the first place. What happened 39 years ago? That lady, whose name I don't particularly enjoy mentioning, gave away our oil wealth to the private sector. So, of course, that has left us now in a much weaker position. And selling off these public assets, as what it's done is put us in a weaker position now. When things get tough, we don't have that to fall back on to give us that extra protection of the public purse. And what is the government's answer when the council is struggling? Sell off your assets. I mean, what short-term answer is that? I mean, yes, we talk about a magic money tree, but actually, take away the magic. There is a money tree that is the wealth within this country that should be going back to the people in this country, and it's just incredibly short-sighted to take away from the public assets which will help the people of this country and sell them off to the private sector. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate the Mayor on what I think was an absolutely excellent speech. I would like to turn to the subject in that speech that's quite close to my heart, and that is legal aid cuts. And in my previous job, I spent a lot of time doing legal aid work, generally for fathers who were seeking custody and access to their children. That legal aid is now non-existent. In fact, in matrimonial matters, you can only get legal aid where violence is concerned.
Therefore, these fathers will not apply for custody and access anymore if they don't have access to legal aid. And that means there are many families now in this country without any fathers, either at the head or the children having any contact whatsoever with fathers. And I submit that if there are no fathers around, that leads to the breakdown in society. And that is caused by legal aid cuts in this respect. And finally, just to say that they always say the sign of a civilised society is access to justice for all. Well, I don't think we have that anymore, which begs the question, do we have a civilised society anymore? Thank you.
Councillor Lancaster.
Mr Mayor, can I just first of all congratulate Paul, who I thought gave an excellent speech, and I wanted to add to one of the things he said. He talked about releasing 2,000 police officers. That's only a small amount. There's also 1,000 police support officers which were taken out of the equation as well. Now, for Robin to start talking about the police service and they're the blame of all the crime going up, to me is an absolute nonsense. 3,000 police officers less on our streets is a significant amount, and it can only actually be dealt with, in my opinion, in partnership with local authorities, that we actually do our utmost, and with more police officers we can perhaps tackle the problem. I also want to emphasise, this week I actually did a report on the probation service. What absolute chaos is the probation service is in. That was privatised by this government. And at the end, you look at their paper which they've submitted, they've listed failure after failure of the probation service and decided to withdraw the contracts from the private sector who are operating that probation service. That's an indication about the failure in the probation. Is it helped, in my opinion, to the creation of the increased crime rates we've got. We also had the situation, which I think we got, on the prison service. The prison service record is atrocious. That was privatised. Where's the success story in the prison service? I've not seen any there. There's a lot of officers which are doing a first-class job, but they're not tackling the problem which is really there about the privatisation hasn't worked. I also wanted to emphasise, and I've got to take a personal concern about this, when Robin talks about the lack of development by the City Council over the last 50 years. Well, I happened to be looking at a video, and I pity we can't actually show it in council. It was at Low Broughton 2. Absolutely. Do you remember it? Yeah. For those who don't, it'd be worth seeing the video, because it shows the sort of conditions which the people of Salford were living in 50 years ago. And if you think that we haven't changed, well, look round the city. In spite of a Tory government, there's been massive improvements in this city, and those improvements are due to this local authority, not to any Conservative government. I'm the first to admit there is occasions when they get things right, but it is far and few which they do, and I think their record is deplorable. But I do think, quite frankly, to Robin to actually talk about how he was on the housing committee at the time, and he actually saw the conditions. He went round and you could literally push the walls of some of the houses in the bedrooms. Were moving as you were there. And sorry, I didn't interrupt you. At the end of the road, that's the conditions in this city which we can't accept. People lived in deplorable conditions, and it's a pity reminders were not shown through the city occasionally about what it was like. It's what? Yeah, but you didn't.
You've done a lot, but he's not agreeing with it.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting of the full council, where we discussed the ward boundary changes, Councillor Lindley advised that the Conservative group would not be supporting the council's submission to the Local Government Boundary Commission, and instead an alternative proposal would be submitted. and made available to the public after the 3rd of September deadline. 5 weeks on from that deadline, I was wondering if the City Mayor has seen that alternative proposal.
Councillor Karen Garrido.
Yeah, just on that matter, it will come out from the Boundary Commission in November when they produce it and send it out, so it will be out then, so you'll be able to see it. Just a couple of things. On the children, on the fathers not being able to get access, I know that barristers do what is called pro bono cases, and if they were to apply, I know they have to do so many, and we seem to have a lot of barristers in Manchester and in Salford, so I think if they contact them, they can do pro bono cases. So there is something there as well. On the other thing, right, on the point about selling things off, who sold our gold? Do you know who sold all our gold? It was Gordon Brown. He's not Conservative, he's Labour, right? So he sold on. Salford Keys with Michael Heseltine was put private money, got a private developer to start it off. It is true. Well, right, he'll answer that, will he? Good. Can I just say about poverty as well? We talk about poverty. We keep getting told that our elderly people are living longer. People are living longer. Now, my mother, who we all know is old, lived through poverty. They made everything. They cooked proper food. They didn't drink food. They didn't eat it. They actually did things. On another occasion, closer to home, I'd buy a pound of mincemeat, a bag of potatoes, a tin of tomatoes, an onion, and I'd make 2 meals out of that. Right, we don't teach our children how to cook easy meals. And I think it is important that we go back to basics. Junk food is not good for anybody, as I can prove. It's not very fit and healthy. So I think we should go back to the basic. And I have to say that it was Labour that brought in the PFI, not us. It was Blair brought it in. No, Blair brought it in first, after John Major, but he brought it in. He was the one who told... Blair told the Labour councils to go for PFI. Did he or did he not do that? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. So I'd just like to say, the other thing is, Councillor Merry, I know you're not Councillor Bottle, but Councillor Merry, when the rework was being done by the PFI, should they not have removed that asbestos? And I think it might go for City West as well when they were doing their development. Could they not have removed the asbestos at that time and not left it in? Because we all know how bad asbestos is, and it should have been. And just finally, just the last one, right? Why are we still throwing money at the stadium? It's a white elephant, so let's get rid of it. Sell it. Somebody out there will want to buy it, so can they buy it, please?
Councillor Saunders.
Of course, we allow you to go on a little bit, given that this meeting is 3 weeks later than it should have been, as it was postponed due to the Day of Atonement, for which again, thank you and the Council. 2 points I'd like to ask you. One, you mentioned Brexit. I think you mentioned bargain basement Tory Brexit. You were at the Labour Pardon? You were at the Labour conference, Mr Mayor. Perhaps you could explain the Labour position on Brexit and maybe your own position as well. And for the record, for Councillor Merry, I am actually fully behind Theresa May and her Chequers plan. Certainly I'm not somebody she has to persuade. And my final question is this, Mr Mayor. We may not always agree with everything you say, City Mayor, but we certainly feel you're very eloquent and what you write is very loquacious. Why is it then that we are failing to persuade the government, as you see it, well, why are we failing to put our case across to the government in the way that you said? I'm sure the teachers amongst us would put on a report, could do better.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come in about poverty, and I might not get it in later. It is World Mental Health Day today, and the connotations with poverty are well known. I'm not going to teach my granny to suck eggs in here. I'd like to invite Councillor Greedo to our East Salford Community Committee, which was heavily... You were late, Councillor Saunders, you might have missed it, not having a dig. It was heavily dominated by policing in East Salford and how they can't get round and how they have to prioritise. I know some of our police, they're coming out in eczema, you know, they're looking ill, some of them, they're working that hard. I'm inviting you to our East Salford Community Committee to come and talk to our police there. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Ferguson.
Just coming back to the question that Councillor Dickman asked and the response that Councillor Karen Garrido gave. One of the good things about the microphones is it's not just people in this council chamber that can hear what's being said, but it's people outside, and it records it for us so that we can watch the replay on the video. And so I've been looking at the August meeting, and first of all, in the presentation that Councillor Lindley gave, when he was making it, he did say it would have been nice to bring it today, that was your proposal, but we don't have the same resources as the ruling group do. Now, I think that Councillor Turner at the beginning corrected that statement and recognised that you did have the same resources, and so it wasn't quite clear at that meeting in August why it wasn't possible to bring it, because he said it would have been nice to bring it in August. But then in response to a question from Councillor Kelly at the end, he went on to say, and I quote the words that you can see on the video, "We will submit our response, which is being finalised at the moment, to the Boundary Commission, at which point it will be published in full for all residents to see." He actually said when you finished it, it would be published at that time. Not in November when the Boundary Commission did it, but you were going to make it public. And so I would ask the question, why is it so secret that you can't let the residents of Salford know what's in that report that you've done now, rather than in another few weeks' time?
Can I just answer? I mean, I wasn't here, but and I haven't listened to everything that was said at that meeting. I was reading the minutes, and from the minutes, I thought I corrected that earlier. That what he said there was not factually correct, and I've corrected that. The way I see it, that what he meant, and I'm not Councillor Lindley, by the way, so I'm only surmising what I think he meant. He was forwarding the proposals which he had a big hand in, yeah, so great. He was forwarding it to meet the deadline, I think it was September the 3rd, and it will be for the Boundary Commission to publish all the proposals, and I would presume, and I don't know, but I would presume they would be made public to the world on the internet in November, the beginning of November, as I understand it, but I might be wrong, but it's gone in. Well, I hope it has. I haven't seen him. But I'm praying it has. But all I would say is, in November, when the Boundary Commission release it all, I think you'll be quite excited about them.
The last speaker is Councillor Ansbus.
I'm amazed that Councillor Lindley, who will tweet at the drop of a hat, finds it impossible to make public what everybody else has made public, their views on this consultation. But anyway, that's not what I rose to speak about. I was concerned about two things that Councillor Mrs Garrido said. And one was the way in which she tried to give credit to the Conservative government for the development of Salford Quays. And that is totally untrue. Yeah. Councillor Lancaster was out of the room at the time, and that's why you're still safe. Because I think if he had heard what you'd said, that there would be ructions. But it was the City Council's decision to underwrite the development of the Copthorne Hotel. A major risk at that time, opposed by many people, but a risk that Labour councillors took because of the vision that they had for how this area could develop. And it was simply because of the courage of those members, Lesoff, David and Norman Briggs, other people who were involved at the time, that Salford Quays actually started to develop. That is the truth. And it's very interesting that I think it was about 1986, 1987, where the Tory ministers came down and said, can we turn Salford Quays into our first development company? So that, because we were talking about the Trafford Park Development Company, and they wanted to include Salford Quays in it, so they could turn round to the world and say, what a success it's been. Of course, it wasn't their success. They've always tried to take credit for it, and it was actually the vision of Labour councillors way back then. I think that ought to be acknowledged. And the other thing that concerned me was the offhand remark that Councillor Mrs Garrido made. You know, isn't that thing so good? We're all living longer, and it's true. We are all living longer. But actually, if you look at the statistics in 2011, those improvements have slowed down considerably. And we are still poor compared to other European countries. And in 2015, for the first time, mortality rates actually rose in this country. And there's a reason for all of that. There is a reason why we are performing differently from how we did in the past. There is a reason why we've been performing differently from other European countries. And that reason is Tory austerity.
Thank you. Paul Dennett, City Mayor.
How do I reply to all that? I mean, it'll take a good time to do so. Councillor Jolly, you obviously drew our attention to the negative revenue support grant situation in the run-up, obviously, to the Chancellor's autumn budget and also the local government finance settlement. And I think the letter makes it perfectly clear what's going on here in terms of the government proposing to yet again further manipulate local government financing. And it was really interesting to kind of contrast what you said and with what Councillor Robin Garrido said, because needless to say, Robin didn't draw any attention to the facts in local government financing and the substance that we tried to articulate in this council chamber, but seemingly favoured little party political jibes and politicking over really dealing with the substance of the issue. We're all waiting, obviously, for the Chancellor to make his autumn budget announcement. And obviously we'll see how government propose to handle this in that and also in the local government finance settlement. But you're absolutely right to draw this out. It's an absolute disgrace what's going on here. But from my perspective, Councillor Jolly, I am not surprised They've done it in previous years. You'll remember something called the transitional grant. Well, transitional grant is basically negative RSG by another name, which stuffs money into the coffers of Tory shires, predominantly in the south of this country. Councillor Collinson, many thanks for obviously raising the issue, and apologies to the resident who's obviously had that experience. We will look into that. I mean, I don't know when you received the email from the resident or the contact from the resident, but, you know, officers are there to help all councils casework as and when it arises. You know, please don't feel you have to bring casework to this council chamber for us as an executive and the officers of this council to actually handle that. We'll also look into the request you've made around a separate number to deal with the registration of deaths as well. So thanks for that. Councillor Garrido, I have to say, you know, what you said brought out anger, disgust, and I kind of was struggling for words, really. I've tried for the 2 and a bit years I've been in this job to make sure whatever I say in this council chamber is backed up by evidence, analysis, and some of the latest research we can access in our society, in this country. But it seems to me you're not really interested in actually dealing with all of that. I mean, you talk about what have we done. It's quite clear to me what we have done. You know, like Councillor Antrobus said, we've rebuilt a city that was struggling from post-industrial decline. We were the economic powerhouse of this country until the government decided to put all its eggs in one basket in financial services in the City of London. And it's ironic, the same government now is consulting on an industrial strategy for the United Kingdom, telling us all that actually they haven't got a plan, they haven't got a strategy, these are their ideas, work with us to create a plan, an economic and industrial plan for this country, because they know that what they've done is clearly not working in the interests of Salford, Greater Manchester, the North, and actually most of this country. So I'm not going to engage in the tittle-tattle in some of your supposed questions. However, one of the areas I do want to seriously respond to is the issue on cladding. And Councillor Merry, I understand, addressed a lot of that in his comments. But let's not forget, there was a fundamental review undertaken by Dame Judith Hackett into building regulations and the fire safety order. That review, that independent review, has reported to the government. That independent review took some time to get underway. Before that independent review got underway, we had testing by the BRE of aluminium composite materials. First of all, they were testing samples, then they decided to test the whole of the system. We had to wait significant amounts of time to actually get clarity out of this government around what cladding systems are considered permissible in light of what Dame Judith Hackett said in terms of the building regulations not being fit for purpose. Your government still hasn't formally responded to the Dame Judith Hackett's review into building regulations and the fire safety order. What you did was you announced another consultation on cladding types. And only recently has the Secretary of State actually responded on that issue. But we have still to this day not had a formal response from the government about how Dame Judith Hackett's independent review into building regulations and the fire safety order in this country is to be taken forward, and what legislation needs to be put in place to enact the findings from that research. That clearly says that the national building regulations of this country are not fit for purpose. And you have the audacity to say to us, this city council, that it's our fault we're not doing things quick enough. Well, how can we do things quick enough within a context where we have absolutely no clarity, both on finance, on building regulations, the implementation of the fire safety order, and how all of this is being taken forward? It's an absolute disgrace. And you need to deal with the facts, not the hyperbole that you seem to prefer. Councillor Merry, thank you so much for responding to Councillor Garrido, because like you, I was really angered at what he had to say, and it was pretty disgraceful, to say the least. Councillor Bill Hines, totally agree with you. You know, the Tories have a short memory, don't they, in terms of what's happening in this city. I've provided you all with the data, the statistics, the hard financial reality. £198 million has been lost from this local authority since 2010. That currently represents 48% of our revenue budget. If this was a private organisation, I'm telling you now, it would have fallen over and everyone would have been given redundancy notices and it would no longer be operating if that had happened. So don't tell us that this is incompetence on behalf of a Labour council. This is simply your commitment nationally to austerity, and we are doing the best we can to alleviate poverty in what are awful, awful, inhumane circumstances that disproportionately play out in the north of this country, and specifically in places like Salford, where we have higher levels of deprivation. Councillor Reynolds, you're absolutely right to not look a gift horse in the mouth. And any money we can get from this government, I will happily accept. But let's not forget, at the same time they're giving you 1.2, 1.3 million, you are toiling with this year's budget, as it stands currently, to take £16 million out of this City Council's budget. This is not new money. This is a language game, Councillor Reynolds. They're making you think they're giving you something, whilst at the same time they're taking more and more away from you. It is deceitful, and we should see it for what it is. You're absolutely right as well on social care and the lack of the green paper that's been forthcoming. This has been promised time and time again by the government, but still we have a national funding crisis in social care. Your government forced us last year to introduce the adult social care precept on the council tax bill. Again, a regressive form of taxation that penalises the poorest in society to pay for something that should be financed out of national taxation. We are still no further forward to this day on understanding how social care and the crisis we face is going to be financed. Councillor Lewis, thank you so much for the point you make on public assets. This is something I have been thinking about quite a bit recently, because it's quite clear to me we've got a government, one, that believes in austerity, so cutting budgets, shrinking the state, hollowing out the state ultimately. But how do they do that as well? They do it by flogging off public assets. And that's exactly the same in local government. Look at the NHS. We have a single property organisation making decisions on what happens on property. NHS Property Services, which I understand the Secretary of State is directly involved in flogging on off assets to put back into the NHS. Look at things like Network Rail, flogging off land and assets they have to directly put into their capital programme. This is how we finance public services in the 21st century, flogging off assets of the British people of this country. It's a real concern, and you were right to draw attention to the oil situation and the historic context of this. Do you want me to reply to it?
Well, if you want to reply, but I'm sure we can do it for 24 hours. The question is whether you can have it live to all the statements. Right, it's been moved, seconded.
Are members of the council happy for me to continue with responding to the questions? Okay, I know there's lots of other stuff on the agenda though, that's the only point.
This is it now, you've moved 15 minutes, and you've actually got 26 seconds left.
There's a lot.
How long does the mayor actually have to reply?
It's not written down.
Depends how many lies you told.
You're just taking time.
Okay, so, thank you. Councillor Fletcher, thank you for your kind words on my speech. I try really hard to ensure that they are full of robust evidence and information rather than the usual politicking and hyperbole we see from the opposition. I think you make a really important point about legal aid cuts. And it's really interesting because it's quite clear to me now in 21st century Britain that it's only the rich or people with money in their pocket that can properly access justice in this country. And is that an indicative of a civilized society? Absolutely not. I know we hear about pro bono offers from lawyers, but at the end of the day, it's the sign of a civilized society that people can access justice, irrespective of whether or not a lawyer is willing to or not willing to, more to the point, to offer that support on a pro bono basis. I mean, I don't want to be part of a Britain where we can only access legal advice on a pro bono basis. Councillor Lancaster, thank you very much for highlighting that this isn't just about directly employed police officers, it is also about the PCSOs and the support officers, and you rightly drew attention to an omission in the speech about the 1,000 officers we've lost. And you also highlighted on a couple of occasions how privatisation, despite the Tory party's ideological commitment to the free market and the private sector, how it's fundamentally failed the probation service and the prison service. And I think, you know, the government needs to look hard at itself about their commitment to the efficacy or the purported efficacy of privatisation. Because I think it's clear for all members of the public to see that that clearly is not working. And you were also right to draw our attention to the fantastic work done by Labour councils in this city way before my period of office in terms of tackling the conditions that people of Salford used to live in. We do have a short memory. It was in the 1930s and the 1950s we had private sector slum landlords plaguing this country. And what happened? What happened after World War II? It was councils, it was Labour who built council housing to deal with the issues in the private sector. It was Labour councils up and down this country tackling the failure yet again of the private sector and the slum landlords. They're plum as well, obviously, they're taking the money. Councillor Dickman, thanks for raising the question about the Local Government Boundary Commission. And I think this is an important point because I know colleagues on the opposition are saying that this will be released when the Boundary Commission decide to publish everything. But surely there's a public interest in knowing what your proposals are. The Labour Party's proposals, as you know, form part of a special council meeting. They're in the public domain for people to scrutinise, for people to consider, for people to look at the proposals we're putting forward. We take the public interest in this local authority seriously. So why don't you release them? Why didn't you release them on the same day that you made the submission? I can't answer that question, but I can certainly leave the question with you to consider. Councillor Garrido, I have to disagree with you. I don't think legal access should be doled out on a pro bono basis. I think legal access should be available for all, and I agree with Councillor Fletcher's point that it is a sign of a civilised society. Councillor Antrobus has dealt with the issues, I think, very well about Salford Quays and its genesis. And also on the PFI, I just have to correct you on this, because it was 1992 that we had compulsory competitive tendering under Norman Lamont, where we saw the introduction of private finance initiatives and public-private partnerships. Blair continued that on, something personally I struggled with within the Labour Party. Often told it was the only game in town, but I've always been an advocate of better financial planning. And if that means borrowing to do things, infrastructure, then absolutely we should take those decisions. In terms of the stadium, it's not a white elephant. Operationally, as you know, it's actually washing its face. It's making a profit. A few £100,000 a year the stadium is actually making in profit operationally. You also know that the key issue here is the sale of the land around the stadium to pay off the debt and the working capital. So I don't accept that the stadium operationally is a white elephant. What this council needs to do is try and sell that land as quick as possible to pay back the debt and the working capital, to turn that into a fantastic regeneration part of the city. In terms of Brexit and the Labour Party's position on that, I think we've been clear. We support a deal that protects jobs, services, the economy, and investment. And at the moment, we unfortunately do not have clarity from this government about what deal is being brought forward. So let's wait and see. It seems that at the moment, the Tory party are wrangling with the DUP over the nature of this deal, with visits recently to the European Union. Councillor Hamilton, thank you very much for reminding us that today is World Mental Health Day, a really important issue that we should all take time to reflect on, because I know certainly over the last 2 and a bit years in this job, this has become a real important issue for the workforce of this organisation, for the people of this city, for the trade unions in this city, and for many members of this council chamber. So thank you for drawing our attention to that today. Councillor Ferguson, I think I've already addressed the points you made in an earlier question. Councillor Turner, thank you for reminding me that your party obviously aspires to run the city council, but doesn't actually know whether or not you've made a submission to the boundary review.
That's what he said.
Clearly someone we would want to put our faith, trust in as a city. But maybe you can find out if your party has made a submission to the boundary review. Okay. As the leader of the opposition. Councillor Antrobus, thank you very much for reminding us of the history and the genesis of Salford Quays, which in many respects is one of the reasons why I gave the speech today, in terms of us being able to somewhat mitigate the impact of Tory austerity. You're absolutely right to point out the point about life expectancy and how it has slowed down over recent years. And you're absolutely right to highlight that that is directly as a consequence of a government that is fundamentally committed to Tory austerity and its many, many consequences. Thank you very much.
Item 12, general questions or comments to the Cabinet. There are a number of lead members who are not present. I'm not sure if there's anybody going to answer any questions. Statutory Deputy City Mayor. Councillor John Merry, Deputy City Mayor. Yes. Councillor Marvin Guido.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to make one point regarding the cladding, and that is that half the city's managed to do it by now. Why isn't the other half?
Thank you for your forbearance. Basically, this is another clarification that I have to find myself making today. The Conservative group do fully support the actions taken by the City Council, its officers, its lead member for Children's Services regarding the unfortunate investigation that's taking place at Harrop Fold. And I wanted to make it clear that we do support the action that's been taken under employment law. I thought it was important that I said that. Thank you.
Sorry, Gillian.
Councillor Collison.
Thanks, Chair. Again, it's to do with children's one. What checks are carried out on unaccompanied asylum seekers who claim to be children, and to ensure that young people are in fact children, as if not, they could be inappropriately placed potentially in a children's home when in fact they're actually adults? And I'm trying to anonymise this really, because I have got a situation that I'm very concerned about. So I just want to know what checks we as a council carry out on the young people. Thank you.
In view of what the question you're asking, I believe it should, for legal reasons, it should be a written response. Confidentiality.
Yeah, I mean, there's several. In terms of the investigation at Harrop Fold, you'll understand that in the interest of natural justice, it's not right for me to comment on the merits or otherwise of that at this moment in time. And of course, it is the Governor's investigation rather than the Council's investigation. In terms of the other question, I think a written answer would be most appropriate, because you're asking for a whole complex you're asking for a very complex issue, and it's not just us that, of course, we should be carrying out checks, it's other organisations as well. And I think if the city solicitor can help in drafting an appropriate reply, I think that's what you want to know, isn't it? Now, get on to the interesting bit in terms of Councillor Garrido, because I recall at Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Garrido told me that it would have been better if the PFI hadn't happened at all, right? That in hindsight, that might have been a better position. Presumably, he also felt it might have been better if we hadn't spent money knocking down the slums in Lower Broughton at all. The fact is, there is considerable investment going into the area, and the only way that we could actually make that investment was by actually having a PFI. I know you said it was the only game in town. It was the only game in town, and I spoke at length with the councillors from that area who said they desperately needed that investment. The tenants lobbied for that investment, and eventually we did persuade the government. And you'll remember this, Councillor Hines. Originally they said we weren't going to have it. There was a storm of protest about it, and eventually we did get the resources required to do the job. And I make no apology for that. I think that was the right decision, and we did make the right decision. But in terms of the cladding issue, you're asking why it's taken so long. I felt very frustrated a couple of Scrutiny Committee meetings ago, and Councillor Lewis will remember this, when you were busy denouncing me for not having spent the money that the council had authorised in the loan. And at that stage, I knew that the situation was that civil servants were telling you, you can't spend the money until we've considered whether to give you permission or not, and had spent months deciding that we weren't going to be allowed to spend the money. Now, the reason I couldn't say that, and this is quite amusing to me in my life, I've been warned to be very careful about making statements about the financial status of the company, particularly as one of the investors in that is quoted on the Irish Stock Exchange. And so the information that I would be giving would be market sensitive to their share price on the stock exchange. So I was being very careful. The answer is to be careful about the answer I gave you, because I didn't want to affect people's share prices. Surely that is something that you would appreciate above all else. It is quite important, actually. So we are not in your position to be able to spend the money willy-nilly, we had to either lend the money to Peatol to do the work or get them to raise the money themselves. Now, we've worked very intensively to put the right conditions in place for the money to be lent. Everybody, I think, on the blocks has welcomed that, has welcomed the fact that we've been managing to raise the money. But how much easier would it have been if months earlier, we'd have been given a straightforward authorisation by the government, go ahead, lend them the money at a commercial rate of interest, you're not going to suffer, the taxpayer is not going to suffer, the only people that are going to gain are the tenants. And quite frankly, I think the government treated them as pawns in the game. And I think if I was you, I'd get onto your government pretty quickly and say that they've let your party down as well as my party in terms of the way they approach this issue.
3 hours.
Do,
Yeah, I can get through it.
do we wish to carry on? Or in the resolution to say 15 minutes or not? We can actually deal with about 3 items at the moment. Right. Councillor Bill Hines, lead member for finance.
Councillor Saunders.
Sorry, Councillor Saunders.
It's a question to Councillor Hines.
Yeah, that council tax is aggressive. Money should come directly from the government. Could the lead member confirm that that is in fact the official position of this council, or indeed the Labour Party, that council tax should be abolished and all funding should come from the government? Well,
I didn't say council tax should be abolished. I actually said council tax was a regressive form of taxation.
It is.
And we should be looking to national taxation to finance the crisis in social care. That's what I said. Not abolish council tax.
Yeah.
Any questions? Council tax doesn't. It's not the point. No. It's not the same thing. Council tax doesn't just pay for adult social care.
No.
Council tax pays for loads of different
Absolutely.
things. So no, it's not the same thing, Councillor Greenwood.
Am I still on or what? What's going on?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if there's been any impact on levels of recycling following the move to 3-week bin collections.
I think he deserves a written reply. Can you reply here and now with facts? Yeah, fine.
The collection was rolled out over a 3-year period, but so the first year was in 2015-16, and when we recycled 33,911 tonnes, which was 42% of the waste arisings. In 16-17, that went up to 35,923, which was a recycling rate of 44.9, and in 17-18, we actually had a recycling rate of 36,774 tonnes, which is a percentage of 45.6. That's in spite of, and I think this is quite important, the number of properties increasing. In the first year of the operation, there was 112,500 properties. In the following year, it was 113,010, and in the last year, it was 114,710. So we're quite pleased with those figures, but we're never satisfied. We'll continue to recycle more, and we're happy with the way some of the supermarkets are now operating, including the Co-op, in what they're doing about recycling waste. Sorry.
Thank you. Derek Answorth, lead member, Planning and Sustainable Development. Yes. Councillor Guido.
I'm going to ask the question purely and simply because the City Mayor's here. And you did say at planning we needed to ask the question in his presence, right? And that is about affordable housing on developments on the SP, the supplementary planning document that we haven't got because we've got an outdated one, which means that we can't do any affordable houses on certain sites. And I'd like to say, could we have this document as soon as possible? Because I think that if we're looking for affordable housing, we need to be able to put them on sites which wherever they are in the city, right, where it's close to businesses and close to shops and close to the centre. So can we make sure that that supplement document is done sooner rather than later? I don't want to wait till next year. Can we do it this year, please?
That I don't remember bringing the City Mayor into this, although he's passionate about this subject. I won't go into the long explanation that I gave at planning panel, which took about 15 minutes in itself, so I won't do that. But we do need to update our policy. The most effective way to do it will be through the publication of the local plan. But what we are doing is we are using the evidence that we've gathered for the local plan to revise our supplementary planning document. And I hope that we'll be able to do that, to publish the draft of that, either later in this year or very early next year. And it really is a question of the capacity of our staff who are actually dealing with the local plan and the GMSF at the same time. That's the only issue in the way. But the we want to make that change because, of course, the local plan will not come into force for quite a while because it's got a lot of processes to go through, whereas the supplementary planning document, we can move more quickly on them. And we're anxious to do that because we do need to amend our policies to take account of the success of the city in creating more development, which is raising land values, and we should be able to extract those land values to invest in affordable housing.
Thank you. As we've now gone past the 3 hours statutory time for this council meeting, and there hasn't been a resolution, which I did mute, did he want it, I now declare the meeting closed, and the rest of it will be done at the next meeting.